Well, I think that's enough time for folks to get settled in. So good morning. My name is Dave Stoops. I work for the School of Education and Human Development as an instructional designer and instructional technologist. And we'll be presenting today on Poll Everywhere. A little bit of a rundown about what we're going to be presenting on. We have Alex Greenfelder. He's from Poll Everywhere. He's going to be providing an overview of Poll Everywhere and some of the things that you can use the tool for. And then we'll be hearing from Filip Loncke. He is in the School of Education and Human Development, and he'll be speaking about how he's used Poll Everywhere and how it's working in his class. And joining him will be his TA, Tracy. And then just to wrap up at the end, I'll provide a little bit of information about support across grounds and how you can get Poll Everywhere integrated in your class. So with that said, I'm gonna leave it to Alex to start with the overview of the tool. Alex, take it away.
Fantastic, thank you. So my name is Alex. I am the Customer Success Manager for the University of Virginia Poll Everywhere account. And so today I'm going to provide a brief overview, kind of high level on the tool. Unfortunately, just not enough time to go too deep into everything that can be accomplished with the tool, but I'll keep it more high level just to show kind of what the system looks like for presenters, in this case, instructors, and then also participants, so the students who are responding. And then we'll have some time for hopefully a Q&A at the end. So with that, I will dive right in here. All right, so Poll Everywhere is fairly simple. It's an audience engagement tool. So now what exactly does that mean? It can mean really anything. It essentially means as the presenter who has created poll questions, you are looking to get responses from your participants. So this could be something as simple as a multiple choice question, where you provide a question, you provide different answer options, and the participants select one or multiple of those answers. It could also be something as general as a more open-ended question. So something like, how are you feeling today? And it's just a one-word response. It could also be a clickable image where there is a picture of something and participants need to select a certain area of that image. So lots of different use cases, but if we boil it down, it's as simple as the presenter is asking a question and the participant is submitting a response to that question. And so to start out, we will talk about the participant side of things. So there's a number of different ways that participants can respond to a poll question. The easiest way is simply going to a web browser. In this case, all of these examples are going to be my specific polling session. So that's where you'll see this piece right here, Alex. That's my username. So that's actually how participants would identify my specific polling session, which is different than any other user in the system. So if I were the presenter and someone wanted to respond to my questions, they would go to this site. If there was another user, maybe their username is John, they would go to pollev.com/John. And that works on any browser. That could be on a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, mobile phone, really any internet connected device. The second way, we actually have two separate mobile apps, one for Apple iOS devices, another for Android devices. That is a free download from the appropriate app store. And it's a very similar user interface as the browser. It's just a standalone application rather than a browser like Safari or Chrome or something like that. The third way is to scan a QR code, and this is specific to each individual user. So the QR code will link specifically to this page here. So if you were to scan this right now, you would actually be taken to this page. And the final way, which honestly is the, I guess, most difficult way in the sense that it's, there are a couple caveats to this, but you can text in your responses as a participant. So in this case, you would text my username to this specific phone number to join my session. And then you'd follow up with a response to my question that I have activated at any given time. So it's a bit more cumbersome to go via text. So we won't touch on that one too much. The main one I'm going to focus on is the browser. And so if we look, this is actually what it would look like right now from the participant's end. If you went to polev.com/Alex, this is what the participant would see. So right now, I actually don't have a question activated. I'm not presenting a question to my audience. So nothing is here. Now, what we do see is this separate little tab up here. I have actually activated a relatively new feature that we've introduced called a pinned Q&A question that actually allows a question to be continuous. So it doesn't require it to be presented, but it is activated in the sense that participants can actually respond to this question. So in this case, I made it very simple. It's just a standard Q&A. If anyone during this presentation has any questions about Poll Everywhere, go ahead and throw those in here, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end to talk about those. But the main piece for the presenter is the single question that we have activated during a presentation. And so now what does this look like? So if we go into PowerPoint, I've already added in a couple poll questions just to kind of get familiar with it. I'll also go through the process of creating a new question and inserting it into PowerPoint because that is a very standard use case is I have my own original content that I'm presenting in PowerPoint, but I also want to have some poll questions as part of that presentation. So instead of going back and forth between my account on a browser and my content in PowerPoint, I actually have the ability to put my questions directly into PowerPoint. And this is what it'll look like. Each question that you make in the system actually will be its own slide in the presentation. So let's see what that looks like. So if you've joined in to my polling session, we're now going to present this like we would a real presentation, and we'll see that these questions will actually activate and allow responses. So if I were to play this, say we're in the presentation, we're going through, this is what we now see. And so we have the instructions up at the top, respond at polev.com/Alex. We have the question, and then we have different faces, and we can already see that we're getting responses. So that's what those little green dots are. So in real time, participants are responding to my question, and I'm actually able to see this directly inside of PowerPoint. If I were to advance to my next slide, that previous question will now become deactivated, so participants can no longer respond to that, but now a new question is activated. So here's the new question. You should still see it if you're on the browser. That should automatically update. And again, we have the instructions up here. And if you wanted to use the QR code, we actually have this specifically on the slide as well. So you can download it as an image. You can also click here and say, hey, scan this QR code, and you'll be able to respond. And so this is our word cloud poll type. So as you see, individual responses are coming in, and they automatically start to form a cloud based on the different responses that come in. So this is a very cool poll type for single word responses. What we would see if multiple words were submitted in a response, it would actually break it apart. So we like to, for word cloud, say, keep this to a single word. If you have to do multiple words, the actual trick here is to put like a dash or an underscore in between the words instead of a space. So little pro tip there. And then that's it. So if we then back out of the presentation, we're back in regular edit mode of PowerPoint. And then if we go to our account page, we'll actually see that all of these responses have carried over. So anything that happens inside of PowerPoint, you still have access to on the back end of your account. So here, these were the two questions that I presented, and we got responses for both of those. So that's how easy it is to utilize it inside of PowerPoint. Let's take a second and let's actually go through the creation process and the insertion process of getting that question into PowerPoint. So let's say we're on our dashboard here. We want to create a brand new question. We come in here, click activity. And this is where we would select the type of activity that we want. So I already mentioned a couple examples, multiple choice, word cloud, clickable image. We do have some other options as well. A Q&A, very similar to an open-ended, where participants can submit whatever response they like. They're not limited to predetermined set of answer options. But the Q&A actually also allows that upvoting and downvoting feature. So it can kind of take the pulse of the audience so you can get the most popular responses and maybe speak to those before the ones that didn't get as many upvotes. Again, we saw that clickable image. A survey, I'm not going to go too deep into survey now, but a survey is kind of a separate functionality. So instead of a live presentation, a survey is a great tool for asynchronous offline questioning. So maybe you have a survey with 5 questions. You send that to your participants and say, hey, you have the next week to respond to these questions. And then we're going to discuss the responses that we receive at that time. So less live results, more offline at the participant's own pace for a survey. Competition, this is kind of our take on trivia with a leaderboard setting. And if you hit more, you're going to get some other options here. These are just different use cases. So if you're thinking, what kind of question do I want to create? Click that more option, and this could give you some more ideas. But for right now, let's stick with, we've already seen a clickable image and a word cloud. Let's see what a multiple choice question looks like. So a very simple question here, and then I'm going to fill in my answer options. Keep it simple. All right, so we have our question, we have our 3 answer options. I can also mark a correct answer or multiple correct answers if I want. So I'll do that just to show you what it looks like. And then let's create it. So this will take us into the configuration page. And what we see here, this is actually the slide that we saw inside of PowerPoint. This is what will get inserted. And there's a bunch of different configuration settings we can adjust over here. Again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into any of those right now. But we can see, okay, we have our question. It's created. Now let's go into PowerPoint. Let's actually add this to the presentation. So if we switch back over to PowerPoint, one other caveat for right now, I am working on a Mac. So it's a slightly different process than on a Windows machine. Right now on a Mac, I actually have a separate app for Poll Everywhere in my dock here. Whereas if you're on Windows, once you install the software, it will actually be up here in your menu bar. So right inside of PowerPoint, you'll click the Poll Everywhere tab and you'll do everything right in PowerPoint. Whereas because I'm on a Mac, I actually have to click out and go to a different app and it opens, and now everything would kind of line up between the 2 operating systems. And so here we have a list of all the questions that are on my account. And here's that question that I just created. So this is the one we want to insert. So I'm just going to select it, insert slides, and I have a couple different options for inserting it. I'm going to stick with just the default for now. So if I insert that slide there, we now see it gets populated. And a couple of things we see right off the bat. One, we see these blocks in all 4 corners of the slide. That's because this is simply an image. We place this image on top of the slide, and then when we enter slideshow mode, that's where we actually bring forward a browser window on top of the slide to display all of the information. So what we need is this information down here. So if you have notes on your slide, don't delete this, just put your notes below this, because this actually has to remain in the note section in order for the question to properly activate when you're presenting in slideshow mode. So now let's go back in. And there we see the question activate. So these letters actually correspond to if you're responding via text. So if you are using your text message application, you would send my username, Alex, to this phone number to join my session. And then you would send either A, B, or C based on which answer you want to select. And so if we were to get other answer options being selected, these bars would change. And this would all happen in real time. So right now, all of the responses we have received have been for Tuesday. Great. But if we got some Mondays and Wednesdays, these would all adjust accordingly. And then because we set that correct answer, and there we see it. What I can do is if I hover my mouse cursor over the right-hand side of the slide, I get the menu buttons. And there's one here that says show correct. So if I were to click on that, it would actually highlight the correct answer. So great, we can say, 67% of participants got the right answer. Fantastic. I could also, again, hide that if I want. So I have the ability to interact with the slide right inside of PowerPoint. And again, in real time, all of this happens as I'm doing it, as I'm getting responses. It's all live. So again, if we're done, we can back out. And it all saves back to the account page. And so just to show anyone who's not following along, actually responding, this is what it looks like on the participant's end. So here's the question that was activated during the presentation, and here's what it looks like. So the participant will see the question. They get a little bit more context based on different settings that the user can actually adjust. And in this case, we now see the different answer options because this is a multiple choice. So all they have to do is just select one of these options. And then they also get a little preview of what is shown live during the presentation. And this can actually be adjusted as well. You can actually turn this off if you want. But this is kind of the basic of what it looks like from the participant's end. And again, they can always switch back and forth. So this is the activated question during the presentation. This is my ongoing Q&A. They can come in here and type in a question or anything. And it looks like we do have a question. And this is a great one. I think this will be touched on a little bit later in the session. But if not, I'm happy to provide some context. Yeah, so that is kind of high level on how to create questions, to present questions, and also what the participant sees on their end. A couple other pieces just to kind of wind down my time before we go ahead and shift this over. There are a couple other pieces we can talk about. Let's go ahead and talk about where you can get the application. So if you want to utilize PowerPoint, if you come to polleverywhere.com/app, this is where we have it listed. I don't know if there is kind of a repository on the University of Virginia end where you might be able to get it installed. But at least from our end, if you want to install this on your computer, just come to polleverywhere.com/app, and this is where you would install it for Windows or for Mac. And so that's the first step in actually utilizing this inside of PowerPoint. Once this is installed, then you're able to actually go in and start inserting your questions into PowerPoint. And something else you can do is actually create questions right inside of PowerPoint. So actually, if I were to open up the software, and again, this can work on Windows as well, but I come in here, I can create a new activity right in PowerPoint, and then it will again sync back to my account on the browser. So any responses I receive, I am able to see that data after my presentation. So you really have two options there. You can create them on the browser and then insert them, or you can create them right inside of PowerPoint, insert them, and then it syncs back to the website. Any questions before I kind of hand this off to some other individuals who are going to talk more about their specific use cases?
Is there a way to make it so you have multiple questions like in one, so like a quiz, like combining activities into like one type, or is the only way that you can have them like in a sequence, like in a PowerPoint?
Yeah, great question. So that is where our survey functionality comes into play. So if we are presenting live, it's going to be one at a time. So each individual question becomes its own slide that you as the presenter present one at a time. But if we wanted to do something more in bulk, that is where our survey functionality would be great, because it would allow us to have multiple questions and participants can respond to those questions at their own pace. So if I come in here, I create a survey, I can create any number of questions here. So in your scenario of doing a quiz, maybe we want to do, 5 multiple choice questions that all have at least one correct answer. This is where we would enter that information. And so if we were then to either activate the survey, or we also have the ability to send a direct link to the survey to participants, they'd be able to respond to all of these questions at one time, essentially.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I have a test one. This is kind of what it looks like. So let's say we have a survey. This survey has 3 questions. There's a couple different things I can do. So one, I can share the direct link to this survey. And this is what it looks like. It's kind of a big, long URL up here. But it will take participants straight to, well, hang on. I actually have a setting on here. I'll just log in real quick. So this brings up another point. You can require registration for questions. Oop, there we go. Okay, so this is what the survey would look like. So I have my 3 questions in the survey, and participants can start it at any point, and they can go through the questions at any pace. The other option would be if I activated the survey, if the button would work. That's weird. Yeah. So if the survey gets activated, then it shows up on my response page, polev.com/Alex. So this shows up as activated, whereas this, the dedicated link, the survey doesn't have to be activated. Now, the caveat there is if you activate a survey, but then you go and activate a regular poll question, it deactivates the survey. So let's say I'm now presenting this question here, it's activated. You see it kicks out my survey. So the survey is no longer activated. This question is. But I can still do the survey through the dedicated link. So that's where there are kind of some different use cases. The main one is, we're presenting one question at a time live. If we get into the scenario of wanting to do either something offline, we can do a survey, but then throw in the scenario of doing something offline while also doing something live. Then we have some different workarounds that we could do. But yeah, that is definitely an option where we can say, hey, students, here are multiple questions that you can respond to. It doesn't have to be live.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there's some questions in the chat related to this.
Let me pull that up here. you. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so first question, if you have created the individual questions, can you copy and combine them into a survey? So yes, we do have the ability. If you create individual questions, that goes to kind of our current organization system, where if you have individual questions, you can actually combine them into a folder. And once it's a folder, then you can convert it to a survey. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to take these questions here and make a folder with them. We could do that. And then once we have a folder, then we can convert it to a survey. So let's say we have these questions here in this folder. If we click here, we can convert it to a survey. So it changes the functionality from individual questions that have to be one at a time to a survey where they can respond to all of the questions at their own pace. So kind of just a process there where, yes, you can convert individual questions into a survey after the fact, or you can always just do it a survey right out the gate, depending on what you've done so far. Okay, and then the second question here is, when presenting from a browser, but not in full screen, why do the buttons not auto hide? Yeah, so we are actually in the process of, so if we go into a question on the browser, what we see here, again, this is the poll slide. We have those buttons, but if we're not in full screen mode, these buttons will stay and they'll cover a portion of the slide. So if you had a really long question or you had content that might be over here, these could potentially cover up certain content. Our team's actually in the process of updating this UI. So be on the lookout. I think relatively soon, there's going to be a beta where this changes to be a little bit more slick and show more of the actual content on the slide. But as of right now, these buttons stick when you are not in full screen mode. But if you do enter full screen mode, they then work like PowerPoint, where you have to hover over the right in order to get to them. So this page here, it's more like a simple configuration page where we want to show all of the options. If there will be actual presenting, then we would go into full screen mode. Yeah, and then final one here. I know we're kind of right at my time, but happy to touch on this one. In terms of reporting, so let's say we get responses and then we want to look at the response data. That is where our reports feature comes into play. So if we come in here, we come into reports, we can actually create a number of different types of reports. They all essentially take the same data, but they lay it out in a different way. And so the one that is most popular amongst our higher ed clients is the gradebook report. So if we were to create a gradebook, we would then select the question or questions that we want to include in the report. In this case, I'm just going to do that one question I did earlier that had the correct answer. So I'm going to select that question and create my report. And so here is what we see in that report. So we see the different participants. And so we see my name because I am currently registered. So because I'm registered, we see my full information. But then we see we have a couple other people that responded, but they are unregistered. And so this is actually their screen name. And if someone didn't enter a specific screen name, we actually auto-generate one. So that's where guest 607 comes in. This person decided not to enter a screen name, so we can't identify them, but we can still know their responses. And so that's where we have one question. It has a correct answer. And I actually also have another beta feature called weighted grading on that actually allows you to assign different point values to different answer options. So that's why you see a 1 here and a 0 for incorrect. Now, if I took weighted grading off, this would literally just be a check mark or a dash and say they got it wrong or they got it correct. But this is essentially what grading looks like. So if we had multiple questions that had grading, we would do a cumulative score here. So if there's 5 questions, someone gets 5 right, boom, they get 100%. If there's 5 questions, someone gets 0 right, they get 0%. And so this also then plays into the backend piece of registering students, where if you import them through an LMS, you can actually, they become registered and you'd actually be able to see all of their names. You would be able to see a full history of their responses. And you could then export this back to the LMS and actually give them a grade in the LMS based on their responses here. So the grading feature and the reports feature, very valuable, especially if you are doing more knowledge assessment and maybe less just broad feedback or participation or even attendance. If you are doing that knowledge check where we have correct and incorrect answers, a gradebook report will be a very valuable tool. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it from my end. I am going to kind of kick it over to some other individuals that have actually utilized the tool and talk through some different scenarios where they actually utilize Poll Everywhere.
So I suppose that's going to be me and Kit, right? Kit, can you make yourself visible? Okay, there he is. So yes, first, yeah, thank you. It's great to be here and to meet other people and to tell them about our experiences with Poll Everywhere. So to tell the truth, so I started with it about a year ago, kind of as a replacement for what I used to do with iClicker. So because I teach classes with more than 100 students, and one of the, as you know and can imagine, one of the challenges is to keep the students entertained and keep their attention. If you teach online, it's even harder because you don't have visual, you don't see actually what they are doing. So anyway, so that's one of the techniques one of the reasons that I try to make them aware of. If you just pay attention, you can answer quick questions, real quick, multiple choice questions. That's what I use it for mainly. But lately I have moved toward other applications, and and that keeps their attention, I hope, or at least when I mean at certain times throughout the presentation. Now I'm very glad that Kit can join us now, because Kit is in an interesting position, because back in the spring, Kit was one of the students in the class. So Kit has some experience of how it looks from the student point of view, and then now in the past 2 months, almost 3 months in the summer, Kit has been my grader and my TA for also online courses that I was teaching over the summer. But now Kit was not a student anymore, at least not for these courses, but the TA. So Kit has seen it from 2 perspectives. And my first question, and one of the things when we were preparing for this session now, and I asked Alex, is can you really show from a perspective from the teacher, from the person who's making the question, but also from the perspective from the student? And Alex, this was the very first time that I saw it from the perspective from the students. I saw this cartoon there, and then the question. So my question for Kit, is that what you saw when you were a student, or was it different?
Primarily, yes. Yeah. It was pretty much that it'll have it off, and then when the question gets turned on, then the question comes on. And I think one of the things that Alex didn't necessarily touch on is you can clear your response and resubmit a response if you realize that you actually clicked the wrong one. There is a button that is clearly labeled, but that is something that can be helpful during responses.
Oh yeah, and so one thing that you also showed, Alex, that I didn't know, or maybe I misunderstood, was that you can see the display while you're vote. Is that correct? While you're voting, so can you see? And then if you see, okay, the majority of the class is voting for A, and I voted for B, it's probably wrong. And can you change that? Is that
I
what?
believe so. Most of the classes I took turned that feature off.
Okay, I was not aware of that feature at all. Yeah, because that's kind of the equivalent of looking over the shoulder of your neighbor in the classroom, right? So we have to turn that off. I didn't even know that. So yes, the way we have been doing this is mainly, so we did multiple choice, and then what we have been, and there are two different, actually in our situation here at UVA, there are two different ways of then bringing the results into the grade book. In the spring, when Kit was not my TA, what we could do then is, because then we were working through Canvas, and there is a way to actually immediately import it into Canvas. When in the summer we used Colab, and there we had, well, that's where you had to put it in there manually. Is that's correct? Good. So the way what I did is, so I had my session every morning at 8 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, the session was over. I went through the steps that Alex just described, how you create a report, and we created a gradebook report, and I immediately sent it in as an Excel file to Kit, and then Kit could Kit, tell us what happened then.
Yes. So when I get the email that has the Excel file, and it can be an Excel file, if it comes as an Excel file, I can just change it to what's called a CSV file, because it's pretty much just the text. And when I go to Colab, I can then export the gradebook, because I need to export it as a CSV file. And then I need to make sure that all of the students in the gradebook match the list from the Poll Everywhere file, because Poll Everywhere is tracking who responded, not necessarily who is in your roster. So I just need to make sure that the file from Poll Everywhere lines up correctly with the gradebook file. And then once that's lined up, I can just copy and paste those responses, those scores, into a new item that I make on Colab's, or sorry, not Colab's, the CSV file I exported from Colab. Save that file and then import it as if you had a CSV file. And I know UVA has instructions on how to do that in Colab. So it's relatively quick. The most time-consuming part is just making sure that the exported file from the gradebook, that list of students matches up to the list of students that responded to the Poll Everywhere CSV file.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So most of what I have been doing this is multiple choice, but lately over the summer I have been started to explore other things. So other things that I have been doing, I don't think you showed that, Alex, was the word cloud. So the course that I was teaching this summer is psycholinguistics, and we talk about linguistic diversity, and in our case about the fact that certainly UVA has really linguistically at least a diverse population of students. So I asked them, just type in the languages that you speak or that you have access to in your family or in your immediate environment. And so we got a word cloud. Of course, English was the biggest word, and then Spanish, but there were maybe like 30 or 40. That was actually an interesting thing. Then another exercise I did was I don't know what the name of that is, but it shows the map of the world, and I let the students listen to recordings of people who speak with a foreign accent, including myself, and then ask them just to pinpoint on the map where do they think this person originates, which part of the country they are in. So and I am planning to use it more in the future, also in that kind of more in the interactive / and so entertaining part of the course with that purpose, not only as a test, as make sure as a way to make sure that they are paying attention. So yes. What else do we have to say? Oh yeah. Another thing that I saw actually on your in the app that I have not used is the maybe Alex, you can say something about it. The audience demographics. So what I intended to use that now for my upcoming class, because it's another big class that I'm going to be teaching, and I have not students just from the school. We are in the School of Education, but we are really in that course. We have students from all over the universe, from all walks of life, and just to bring in, if they could just type in their major that they are in, or that they intend to be in. So there's going to be some demographic information. So I suggest this is, and I see that Rip has also used it. So maybe Rip, you can put in your 2 cents also. But I suggest the first time that you use it, or with your students, and maybe also the second time, not to let it count for points, but many students have to familiarize themselves, even if you explain it very well, how to do it. Some students don't get it exactly what they are supposed to do, on if they can use their phone or something, and they make mistakes, and then Kit gets all these emails to say, well, I was there and I tried to do it, but they didn't respond, and all that. So that the first 2 times, don't let it count for points, that they have to take down that anxiety, and so that they can play around with it a little bit. And another thing is, and I'm using a Mac also, so I'm not sure if that counts for the PC users, but you always have to make sure that your questions are already inserted in your PowerPoint, but then when you're playing it, your PowerPoint, that your Poll Everywhere app is also open on your computer. That's correct, right, Alex? Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Correct. Yes. So because on a Mac, it is a separate application, it essentially has to be open in the background as you're inside of PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Something, Kate, do you want to add something?
I think the one thing is just more during classes, it really helps from the student perspective to both at the start of class be reminded what the link is to the Poll Everywhere, because it is possible, just as during this the past hour, you can just have it open in another tab. So it's useful to have that reminder, because giving a little bit of time to the students so that they can get ready and be prepared to respond to poll questions is definitely beneficial, because I know sometimes students don't get a chance to respond because they might forget to have it up in a tab and not have time to respond because they're trying to log in and get to that. So cutting that out by just kind of reminding, and I know Dr. Loncke, you did this too in the spring, is giving a little bit of time and then checking in with people if they've had time to respond is always good.
Yeah. And I put that login warning, or always on the very first slide. That sits there when students come to the class. And so who benefits from that? All the students who are not late in the class. And as you know, there are always a few who are not there in the first minute. So that's always a problem. So yeah, other things.
Yes, going off of the questions, one of the questions was automatically exporting grades without downloading and uploading. I think in Colab at this point, there is not a way to do that. So for Colab specifically, you do have to go through that process of downloading and uploading. Because I believe that was the instructions we were given Dr. Loncke this summer.
Yeah,
but there is no direct link at this point.
And the same is true in Canvas, which is what the Education Human Development uses. It's a similar process between the two LMS, but Poll Everywhere makes it easy for you to get that, as Kit had mentioned, to get that CSV file, and then once your LMS account and class are linked with Poll Everywhere, the process is really easy to import the roster and then match up the grade book to the CSVs you download.
So Dave, you know how it goes. Is the classes start next week. So the first, I mean, and certainly for my class, it takes about a week, if not more, before you really have consolidated your class. People enroll and they drop it, and then there are late.
Through the add drop period.
So should we set that up like only after 10 days or something? Yeah.
So I would recommend, I would say you go ahead and import your roster now based on I'd say the bulk of your, and I know with your class, Philip, there's always a wait list for yours. So as Rip is saying, the Canvas integration updates the roster continuously. So I would say just do it now, and then it'll work itself out as the semester goes. But once the two are linked, the class and Bowl Everywhere are linked, then it'll keep updating. Now to your point about the add drop and people coming into the class and dropping the class, you might want to do the icebreaker intro to Bowl Everywhere, through the first 2 weeks of class, just to get everybody on board, and it's helpful for the people that have been there the first week, just to get more comfortable. But I think you've seen the Bowl Everywhere. It's a much easier process to get them up and running than it was with iClicker, and just I don't think we've had anybody have any problems. And the students, once the roster is imported in Bowl Everywhere, they're registered, and they're good to go. Does anybody have any other? Filip, was that it for you on the?
That's what I. Do you have other words of wisdom, Kit, or you, Alex?
David, I see your camera's on. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, Philip.
Hi, David.
I had a question. So you mentioned, at the first slide of the day, you would have the get them thinking about logging on and have it in the browser. So how would you, we were shown different ways in which to get students to get to the Bowl Everywhere. How did you share with them? Was it the QR code? Was it just your personal Bowl Everywhere, link?
I didn't.
You had mentioned having problems.
If you have a second, I'm going to share my screen and go to see if I can find a PowerPoint from my one of my classes, because it's always the same thing that comes up. Just a second. I always, and also I'll put the instructions. Actually, Dave can provide you, or I can provide you with that also. Let me just see here. Can provide you with some instructions. So this is my first slide that I show you. See, and each time, okay, oops, and then automatically, actually, you see, okay, sorry. This is the music that I always start with, but anyway. But so it says visit and select blah 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 blah, and then enter your UVA email. That's each slide. I repeat exactly the same. Each class I start with this slide. So that was, and there is a description in the syllabus that is much more detailed and also if they prefer to use the app on their phone or the app on their computer. So one thing actually that we found out was that some of the students were complaining that when they used their phone, it didn't work as well, and the reason might be that if they are really on grounds in the room, that they need to make sure that their phone is on the Wi-Fi of the university and not just on the cell phone, because then it may not work or be much work with a delay, right, Kit?
Yes, that is what we were discussing, is I think you have to be on the same network. So you would want to be on the school's Wi-Fi if you're in the classroom.
Got it. Thank you.
Welcome, David. Good to see you.
All right, Philip, any other questions for Philip as we're in terms of the, the classroom experience with Poll Everywhere? Anybody?
I
All right.
have a question. So you wrote that one way, Alex, one way to prevent students from being categorized as unregistered is limiting the poll questions to only registered participants. Is this something you do for each session, or how does that go? Or how does that work?
Yeah,
Alex?
so you can do it a couple different ways. You can set this as a default. So any new question that you make will have that option selected, or you can do it on a case-by-case basis. So maybe one question you want to be registered, maybe another question you want to leave open. So the scenario could be, for my icebreaker, I don't care if they're logged in, I just want people responding. But my next question, maybe that's like a test question. I want them to be logged in order to capture their response and tie it to their account. So you could have one be set to everyone, one be set to registered participants only.
Okay. Oh, and also like this RIP suggestion to start with a warm-up question to force them or to be logged in. That's a good idea. Okay.
Is a good idea. I will mention also that if it hasn't been already, I know Philip uses it for in his class as part of a participation grade, but I have a couple other faculty in EHD that are using it just for getting a sense of the room and things that may need to be covered again in terms of the topics of the class. And so they're not attaching it to, it's all anonymous. So they're not even linking it with Canvas on our end. They're just using the tool to gauge student preparedness or interest. So there's another option there for using the tool. Real quick, as we wrap up, I'd like to show where you can find more information. So there's a website, learningtech.virginia.edu, and then /tools. If you go to that website, this is a curated list put together by CTE, and it has information on a number of different tools that are supported across grounds. And scrolling down alphabetically, there's Poll Everywhere. And then there's a way to, there's a link here to access it via NetBadge, and then information on who can help you. So ANS link, and then there is some information there within UVA Colab, as well as a direct link to Poll Everywhere support. And then the link to my email if you're in the School of Education and Human Development, all here to help you get started with the tool, as well as the other tools that are curated in the list, and support materials and where you can get assistance. Wanted to make a plug for the website since they've done a nice job of curating all of those tools there. Rip says he never grades his Poll Everywhere questions, but students take them very seriously anyway. That's funny. I can see that. All right. Any last questions as we wrap up?
Yeah, one thing from my end is if anyone has any questions, feel free to send them my way. Very simple email, just alex@polleverywhere.com. Just reach out anytime. I'm happy to provide insights on use cases. If you encounter any issues or funky behavior, let me know. I'm happy to be a resource for everybody.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. And even if you're not in education and human development, you can always reach out to me to get any advice or support. I can always help you find out any information that you might need.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for attending. Everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank
You
you. Nice to
too.
meet everybody.
All right. Take care.